Michael King Sr. and Alberta Williams King. My grandfather took over a small, struggling Ebenezer Baptist church and made it with around 13 members and made it into a forceful congregation. My father stepped in as pastor when my grandfather died in 1931. He too became a successful minister and adopted the name Martin Luther King Sr. in honor of the German Protestant religious leader Martin Luther. In due time, I would follow my father's lead and adopt the name myself. I have an older sister, Willie Christine, and a younger brother, Albert Daniel Williams King. We grew up in a secure and loving environment. My father was a disciplinarian, and my mother's gentleness easily balanced out my father's more strict hand. They tried, but my parents couldn't shield us completely from racism. My father fought against racial prejudice, not just because his race suffered, but also because he thought it was an affront to God's will. He strongly discouraged any sense of class of superiority in us, which left a lasting impression in my mind. I attended segregated public schools in Georgia, graduating from high school at the age of 15. I received a degree in sociology in 1948 from Morehouse College, a distinguished Negro institution of Atlanta, from which both my father and my grandfather graduated. In the September of the same year, I attended Crozer Theological Seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania. In 1955, I completed my graduate studies in Boston University. In Boston, I met Coretta Scott, a young woman of uncommon intellectual and artistic attainments. On June 18, 1953, we got married in Martin, Alabama. Months later, Bill and Denise, our first child, was born. We were blessed with 3 more children after that. Martin Luther King III, Dexter, and Bernice Albertine. On December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama, after she refused to give up her seat for a white passenger. The courageous stand fueled a fire inside me. A few days later, I became the president of the Montgomery Improvement Association and led the Montgomery bus boycott. The boycott lasted 382 days. On December 21st, 1956, after the Supreme Court of the United States had declared unconstitutional the laws requiring segregation on buses, Negroes and whites rode the buses as equals. During these days of the boycott, I was arrested, my home was bombed, and I was subjected to personal abuse. In 1959, I visited Gandhi's birthplace in India. The trip affected me in a deeply profound way. It strengthened my resolve to dedicate myself to the principles of nonviolence. In February of 1960, a group of African-American students began what became known as the Sit-In Movement in Greensboro, North Carolina. The students would sit at racially segregated lunch counters in city stores. When asked to leave or sit in the colored section, they just remained seated, subjecting themselves to verbal or sometimes physical abuse. I encouraged students to continue to use nonviolent methods during the protest. By August of 1960, the sit-ins had been successful in ending segregation and lunch counters in 27 southern cities. In the spring of 1963, I organized a demonstration in downtown Birmingham, Alabama. Entire families attended. City police turned dogs and fire hoses on demonstrators. I was jailed along with a large number of my supporters. From the jail in Birmingham, I spelled out my theory of nonviolence. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront this issue. On August 28, 1963, we organized a march on Washington for jobs and freedom, which drew more than 250,000 people in the shadow of Lincoln's memorial. On that day, I delivered my speech, "I Have a Dream." I told the crowd, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." The rising tide of civil rights awareness produced a strong effect on public opinion. This resulted in the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, authorizing the federal government to enforce desegregation of public accommodations and outlawing discrimination in publicly owned facilities. In 1964, I was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize at the age of 35. On March 7, 1956, a civil rights march planned from Selma to Alabama's capital in Montgomery turned violent as police with nightsticks and tear gas met the demonstrators as they tried to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The attack was televised, showing horrifying images of marchers being bloodied and severely injured. 17 demonstrators were hospitalized, leading to the naming of the event Bloody Sunday. I needed to do something. So on March 9, 1965, with a procession of 2,500 marchers, both black and white, we set out once again to cross the Pettus Bridge and confronted barricades and state troopers. I led my followers to Neil and Freyer, and then we turned back. I lost some of the support of younger African American leaders who wanted confrontation, but nonetheless, it aroused support for the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I expanded my civil rights efforts to the Vietnam War. I felt that America's involvement in Vietnam was politically unjust, and the government's conduct of the war discriminatory to the poor. A multi-race coalition was formed to address economic and unemployment problems of all disadvantaged people. In the spring of 1968, I led a labor strike on Memphis sanitation workers. I told the supporters, "I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land." I admit I'm a flawed, fallible man and limited in my control over the mass movements I have helped organize. But as a leader, I am deeply committed to achieving social justice through nonviolent means. It is my hope that one day, blacks,